Good morning, Quadcopter 101 here. What I got for you today is a neat new quadcopter, the Q222G from WLToys. Now if you look at the Q222G, it is an upgrade of their WLToys V686G FPV 5.8 Ghz flyer. It also includes the same 5.8 Ghz FPV system as on the V686G. It uses the same body as the V686G, except it now comes in different colors. In this case, it's candy apple red. Pretty cool looking color, especially at night. I'll try to do some night flying here in the near future to show that. But what the big advantage of this is, the upgrade of the Q222G, is it now includes altitude hold. It has a barometric pressure sensor inside here that helps it maintain altitude, and it does very well. It does maintain altitude very well. I was surprised on initial test flights that I've done with this quadcopter. I want to demonstrate that today. The features of the transmitter, let's see, have I talked about everything on this? Pretty much. Okay, it's an upgraded V686G with barometric sensor. Now, this is one of the first quadcopters I've seen in the toy grade class that includes this barometric sensor to maintain altitude. Others that I'm aware of is the V666N. I don't know how that one works because I don't have one of those yet. But another one that I've seen is the XK Detect, which is also an affiliate of WLToys X250. Now that includes what they called an air pressure needle. That kind of worked in the X250, except you'd see a lot of it would wander up and down as it tried to maintain that altitude. This one is rock hard solid. When you set that altitude where you want to fly at, it stays at it. It's pretty darn good. Now let's go over the transmitter real quick before we go into the flight. Here's your transmitter. Its claimed range is 150 meters. Actually, I'm not seeing that in the initial test flights I've done with this. I've got out to about 70-80 meters and I lose reception. I don't know if I have a defective transmitter. It is possible. I've run into that problem before, particularly with SEMA X8G having a defective transmitter. I didn't get the range that I was expecting out of it. But let's go over the buttons on this. This is for taking video. This button is for your flip button, activating the flip. This button is for turning on the lights and turning off lights. It also, if you hold it down, is one key return. This quadcopter has one key return. This button here is for taking a photo, or if you hold it down, it enters headless mode. These buttons are for the different rates, namely 40, 60, 80, and 100. And this button here, if you press down in the pitch roll stick, it actually activates automatic landing, where the quadcopter will come down and land itself. Now, with that in mind, there's one thing I want to talk about. To start this quadcopter and stop it, after it automatically binds, but to actually start the rotors spinning, you have to either pull down an outboard or pull down an inboard. Both ways will start the quadcopter, and the quadcopter will enter idle, and it will maintain idling. The propellers will keep on spinning until you turn them off by doing the same again. Now, why is that important to know? When you do a landing of this quadcopter, as soon as that quadcopter touches the ground, be sure to turn those motors off, because this quadcopter likes to flip in a landing, especially if there's a wind. And if that happens and you don't immediately turn those motors off, those motors will keep on spinning, and there's a possibility that you could damage the motors. So you might want to practice that, turning it on, turning it off, turning it on, turning it off, to get a good feel for turning this quadcopter on and off. Okay, let's plug it in and go for a flight. It uses the same battery as the V686G, so there's plenty of batteries out there for this quadcopter. It plugs in the same way. And as the V686G, the battery compartment is the front. And I'm going to point that downfield. And I'm going to turn on the screen. Now, if you notice what I've done to the sunscreen here, I've pasted cardboard onto the front of the sunscreen. Why? Because this screen is hard as heck to see in daylight, but there is a possibility of seeing it if you can cut off most of that sunlight, because that is the big drawback of these little FPV flyers, in that you can't see these screens in daylight unless you do this. Okay, now like I said, start it, pull down and out. Oh, turn on the transmitter first, that helps. Okay, that's the headless mode bearing. It is set to start it into idle. We'll pull down a knot, and the motors stop. Again, once you do a landing, immediately turn off those motors by doing the same, or else you might damage that. Don't be surprised if it flips over. Pulling down the throttle will do nothing to stop that. You have to actually pull it down and up. Now, one more thing I wanted to mention. Notice this throttle. It is centered, spring-loaded centered, which means this quadcopter is not very reactive. Once you start the motors, you got to gradually increase throttle to bring it up to altitude. It will gradually climb. It doesn't, if you push this all the way up, it doesn't really rocket to the sky. This is intended to just set an altitude, and once you set that altitude, you let go of the throttle, and it will maintain that altitude. This quadcopter is not an acrobatic flyer in effect, okay? This throttle is mainly just to set an altitude, and let's do that. Starting the motors, and let's take it up into a climb. And let me trim it a bit too. And there we go. So, in effect, it maintains altitude very well. Let's take it up to eye level. Bring it back toward me. So now you can fly this more or less without worrying about throttle. Trying to use the FPV on this. Okay, let's first thing while we're flying here. Oh, let me land it one more time and show you that landing real quick. Here's the self-landing feature. You press the right pitch roll stick and it descends. Now remember, as soon as that thing touches the ground, and also while it's descending, try to keep it steady. As soon as it touches the ground, shut off those motors. Shut off those motors. Or else they will attempt to keep on going. Now this time I'm turning the camera on. I want to show you the camera. Camera is recording. Let me verify the camera is recording. Yeah, camera's recording. Let's start those motors back up again. Let's take it up a bit. Let me turn the lights off too to save battery power. Now I'm just going to rotate. Showing you the camera. This is what the camera, it's a 2 megapixel camera. Takes your standard 2 megapixel video. Actually the V686G camera was much better, or is about the same as this. It's a good quality camera is what I'm saying, the V686G camera is. And I'm hoping this is the same. I haven't really looked at the video quality of these two yet. Okay, I'm bringing it back down. Lowering throttle. Now notice, when you pull down that throttle, it just comes down gradually. See how much I'm pulling down? It does not drop, in effect. So that's what the camera looks like. I'm going to turn the camera off now, after I bring it down to eye level. Hello there. Camera coming off. Now I want to see that camera is off. I'm going to go right under it, let it maintain altitude, and yeah, I got a steady light now. Now what I want to demonstrate next is one key return. Let's go down that bearing, right about there, and press one key return. Holding the button down, and it looks like it understands that the one headless mode bearing was off in that distance. So that one key return is contingent on knowing what your headless mode bearing was. This seems to be the headless mode bearing off in this direction here. One key return again. Yeah, maybe it's off in that direction. Now there is a way to calibrate this quadcopter's compass. This uses a compass in effect to do headless mode flight, maintaining a headless mode bearing. I did not calibrate it yet. Let's try that one key return again. Yeah, I was never impressed with hood key returns anyways. But notice how easy it is to fly this thing one-handed. Since you don't have to worry about maintaining altitude. And with that in mind, let's enter headless mode. Headless mode's got that annoying beep. But kind of works. Back, left, right. As long as you understand what the headless mode bearing was. I'm not quite sure how that bearing there got set as headless mode bearing. But again, this thing was meant for FPV flying. Turn this off. Headless mode's turned off. Let me trim this up again too. To the right. And let's bring it back in again. You notice I haven't touched this throttle at all while it's been flying. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that barometric sensor works pretty darn well. Let's bring it down to eye level. So you gradually lower it. Now what about acrobatics on this thing? Let's go to 100%. That's how it flies at 100%. How about, see, try to do funnels with this and it enters. Okay, remember, turn it off, turn it off. Funnels, it does not do very well. It enters vortex ring state. Which means this is not an acrobatic flyer. Okay. Seems to remember that last altitude there. Now let's go to 60%. Something more manageable in terms of pitch. Let's see if it can do funnels at 60. Well, that's the kind of funnels you get at 60. It's maintaining the altitude well. How about 80? At 80 it starts to lose altitude. And again, you know, you apply that throttle, it doesn't do much to maintain that throttle or that altitude. So, this, as I mentioned, this is not an acrobatic flyer. It's mainly meant for video. Let's turn the camera on one more time. We'll send it up. One more time showing that camera. And it climbs and descends very slowly. The idea being it is meant as a camera bird, not as an acrobatic bird. Okay, let's bring it down now. Turn the camera off. I'm turning the camera off so I can get as much flight time out of this as possible to show you its features. The automatic landing, let's demonstrate that one more time. Turn it off. See what I mean? This thing likes to flip. Oh, and its batteries are pretty low. So that's what I wanted to show you. If this flips over, those motors will keep on running. So you better practice turning this on and off. Get used to how that works, because you could damage a motor if you overheat it if it's trying to run while it's upside down. So that appears to be the end of my battery. I'm not sure. I got flashing lights. I'm not going to run it out until that battery's dead. So I'm going to end it right here. So in effect, that was the first look at the Q222G. Overall, this altitude hold feature is neat. We're probably going to see this on future quadcopters coming out here for the remainder of the year, coming up to Christmas. I know that's going to have to show up because that's a pretty neat feature that they were able to implement. So this is Quadcopter 101, signing out. Night flying, WLToys Q222G. Altitude hold. It maintains altitude automatically. Kind of unusual to fly it this way, but it does a darn good job maintaining altitude. Lowering throttle, dropping altitude. Works surprisingly well. No, this is not an acrobatic flyer. Let's bring it back here. Just using pitch roll to bring it back. Adjusting trim. Just the breeze blowing it around. That altitude hold works really, really well. Okay, lowering it down to my eye level. Stopping. Altitude hold. Pretty darn cool, huh?